Good morning and welcome to the Morning Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cam, coming to you as always from the Spotlight Studios here in Morristown, New Jersey. My guest today is a third-generation pitmaster, barbecue chef, and restaurateur at his family's acclaimed Davila's Barbecue in Seguin, Texas. He continues to honor his family's legacy and the traditions of Mexican-American cooking, all while exploring his own unique identity. He's appeared on shows like The Today Show, and Tastemade has been featured on the Food Network and the Travel Channel. And now he is sitting with me on the Morning Spotlight Podcast. He is Adrian Davila. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Mike, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
I am so pumped to have you on. And as you know, we were kind of riffing a little bit before we got on here. And I said straight up, like, I mean, I'm a New Jersey guy, full disclosure, have never been to Texas before. Then when we got connected and I started learning more about your place and looking at the pictures of the food on Instagram. And if you don't follow Adrian's Instagram page, you have to, because the food just looks phenomenal. And this whole like shipping the meat across the country, I feel like that's going to be something that I do here in the near future. So I would highly recommend anybody go check out the Davila's Barbecue Instagram page right now. Like, you can even stop listening to this episode. Go check out the Instagram page because the pictures of the food really do this whole thing justice. So I'm excited because this is a very, like I mentioned to you before. So this is one of our Thursday episodes. We do some different conversations. So I'm just curious as we kind of get rolling here. So I want to kind of learn more about how you got into the barbecue world. So I know you're a third generation pitmaster, as I mentioned. I know your grandfather started the restaurant back in 1959, I think.
Yeah.
So what was that like growing up? Were you just like, I'm going to be a barbecue guy? How does that work?
Well, you would assume here in Texas that as a young person, all you do, and men or many people, not just men or not just young boys, they dream or aspire to being in the barbecue world. I have this like saying is like, you know, if you're cooking or grilling, you're living. And if you do it for a living, you must be dreaming, right? So, but quite the contrary, growing up in it, I could never escape it. It was always like, I'm the barbecue guy, barbecue kid, got any barbecue on you? That sort of thing was always, you know, I wanted to shun it. So I actually tried to avoid being in the barbecue business, or I guess to more define that was to avoid just following what was expected of me or what was to be given to me, but far from it. You know, in business, in any business in the barbecue world, nothing is given. We've been open since 1959, and I tell my crew quite often is that it doesn't matter what we did in 1959, it matters what we do today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point. So you mentioned that the barbecue thing wasn't something that you necessarily were trying to get away from it, because it must have just been, you know, your grandfather does it, your father does it. Then it's almost like you said, you're the barbecue kid. Now that's going to be your next thing. So was it expected from of you from the family side? Like, hey, your grandfather did this, your fathers did this. Now you got to do it.
Well, you know, there was more people involved at the time, more extended family, cousins, brothers, sisters, you know, uncles, you know, or great uncles at the time. So, you know, we didn't really know where that was going to head. You know, but different people took different paths, and I stayed in that path. And, you know, by the time you know it, you have a passion for creating and what you're doing, and, you know, and then wanted to carry on the legacy of, you know, your family name is basically becomes your identity. You know, you're known through your expressions of whether it's music or food or whatever you do. And ours is cooking and cooking barbecue in Texas and feeding our community. It's our identity. So it becomes something much larger to uphold and try to upkeep.
Right. Was there like a specific moment in time as you were kind of going through your younger years where you just finally said, okay, I'm doing it, like I'm in?
Yeah, you know, I may have, I've said it before, but it's just that time where I remember as a child, you know, it was before you would break down sides of beef. Things came less processed, so things came more on the bone, and whole animals or carcasses. And my grandfather, you know, would have those in the fridge until a young boy and, you know, kid playing around in the restaurant. You know, could be you know, somewhat of a gory experience. But I saw, you know, when he would break down those items and turn it into something which I would see as beautiful, as you know, cooking the sausage and it going from transforming from one thing to another, and then going out in the front and seeing people enjoy it and smile and creating memories. In essence, is what you do with food. And when you could something that you could create would create somebody's memories, which is always embedded in somebody, you know, with your food memories and where you eat and where you had it. I saw different value in that, and I was like, I'm in. It wasn't, I guess, about the money. It was that what created the passion for what we do.
Right. So talk to me about like what the transition was like from just being like the kid to being the guy. Like now you like when people, I'm sure when people hear Davila's Barbecue and they know that you're Adrian Davila, they probably say, "Oh, this guy started this restaurant." But obviously, we've already established that that's not the case. But talk to me about the transition from but just being, you know, the kid kind of cutting your teeth, learning the business, learning how to barbecue. Because obviously, if you can't do it and if you suck at cooking barbecue, it doesn't matter if the place has been around since 1959, like you said, you're not going to last. So talk to me about the transition from just being part of the crew to being the guy.
Well, you know, and it's, you know, you're not really asked those things so much. So, you know, now at my age, you know, I'm 25, 30 years down the road. And that's a great question because I think of those things. Well, as family members, you know, and teenagers and whatnot, we mostly worked in the front of the house per se. And, you know, when things would slow down and maybe customers weren't in line, you know, I wanted to venture to the back and learn what was going on and learn what was going on with my grandfather. And, you know, I guess to be part of the people in the back were always older, more experienced. And so in order to gain their respect, I learned Spanish and learn how to barbecue and learn what they were doing and be able to do it alongside them. And like you said, if you can't barbecue and know how to do it, then, you know, what does it matter? You don't bring any value. So, you know, 18, 19 years old, you know, working alongside people that were 45, 50 and beyond, have been there a much longer time. You know, that's whenever I started. The time was, to answer the question more accurately, is my grandfather was leaving, and he basically said that if it's going to happen, you're going to gain these people's respect. He's not going to inform them of anything. And it was time for me to step it up. And that's what I did. And for the next couple of days or so, when I manned the pits, I knew there was a transition there because I had done the service, what you would deem the service for those days. I had done it myself. And, you know, that was I felt this like bond with him, this like, you know, notch in my belt after that. And from there, I never looked back.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great answer to a question that, like you said, you don't get asked a lot. And I told you, I did my research. So I'm not asking you all the same questions that maybe you've been asked before. So one of the things, yeah. So one of the things that I was also curious is just because like I like to consider myself a bit of an amateur backyard barbecue enthusiast. So I have a little pit barrel and I smoke ribs and I smoke, you know, shoulders and whatever else. And I suck at beef, so I probably wouldn't, you know, make it in Texas. But what are you cooking on? Like, so I know you said you've been manning the pits. What are the pits like? Like, how would you describe them?
Well, you know, from you know, that's, you know, from what I understand the audience, you know, from the show to be somewhat our pits would be what would look like a room. They're massive. You know, we can literally cook in one pit at one time about 80 briskets, which is about 10 cases, which would translate for easily 1,000 people. And then we have two, and my grandfather designed all these and he built them with his own hands.
So these are the same pits that have been there since 1959? Yeah.
Yes. Well, in this build in Seguin, we moved into 59 from Luling to Seguin.
Okay.
And in 1973, we moved in the building we are currently at today. And those pits were built then, but then again, you're already still talking about going on 50 years. And then there's two rotisserie style pits that are almost like a Lazy Susan style, yeah, with the fire in the middle. Well, I think it's sort of it's important in its way of what you mostly see today. The mainstream is going to be the propane tank barrel offset on one side, and that's what likely you'll see mostly on Instagram if you Google or look at barbecue pits nowadays. So these are very unique, and they cook a little more hot. But I say, going back to what you use, you can still make it happen at home. Just put that little fire on the side, and then you're smoking offset already, and it's not direct, it's not under it, right?
Right.
So any of them, you can make it work. And I found that when I was writing the book, a lot of what people did overall, that's what barbecue started as, just putting something over the fire and moving it over just a little bit. Because if you think of like vaqueros or cowboys or people on the that were essentially moving over grassland, so they were somewhat nomadic. They're just cooking over open flames, and they had to figure it out. And I think that's part of the beauty of what we do, and what we did is my grandfather just figured out. There wasn't this great science and mastery of barbecue and all this information out there from YouTube and Instagram and the plethora of barbecue content that there is now. There was really just figuring it out. And I think that's what's beautiful about people doing it at home, is just figure it out, make it yourself, make it your own.
Right. Yeah. And you have no formal culinary training, right? You just trial by fire, so to speak.
And I when somebody said it to me in a way, or kind of put it in perspective, that I have no culinary training, but I was able to make a couple appearances and have cooked against some very distinguished people, and was able to fare well against them. And of course with the cookbook, and definitely not a writer, and other things that I don't have the business traditional institutional background of business. The acumen where I got myself was today was, just pounding the rock. And I think that's important for people to know, was, either way, you get it, the education, either way, it's really of your choice. But in the end, it's what you do with it is
right.
What's really important.
Yeah, so let's dive into that part about it a little bit more, because we mentioned before we get on that you thought that it may be a good idea, especially given the scope of the audience, would be to talk maybe a little bit about the business aspect of it, because we do a lot of business on this show. One of the things that I did want to get to before we got into that part, though, was just from the culinary side of it, and I think that's where I was going with that earlier question, is that you have I almost said Seguin barbecue, but it's not that. It's Davila's barbecue in Seguin. Duh. And so the place, its current building, right? 1979, you said? 1970?
72.
72, excuse me. So 1972, it was 1959, the original spot. But
Correct.
from the culinary side of it, was there pressure as you were trying to grow the business and grow the menu, for lack of a better word? Was there pressure maybe to kind of stick to the traditions, and you maybe wanted to try to expand and grow to kind of attract maybe a different type of customer? Talk to me about maybe if that was a struggle at all for you, kind of moving through, like you said, you've been in this business 25, 30 years now. So how is that, how's that worked?
Yeah, that's a really another great question. I've never, now again, where I'm at in my career and life, and looking back through things, it's cool to answer, because throughout my career, and I guess our take, or our strategy, or our approach with business or with the barbecue is, we're trying to make money. We're trying to put food on our table. We're trying to sustain a family, or household. So the consumer obviously drives what we sell. And in Seguin, a couple of parts to that answer is we San Antonio and Austin are about 45 minutes away. So when you talk about different types of food that were here or available, and one way was catering. So yes, we had our regular barbecue catering menu and customer, but if somebody wanted something other than, or maybe a little on the higher end, the caterers weren't so abundant in that space here. So that allowed me to teach myself, and I say, yeah, we can do that. And I had to teach myself to do it and really get into other aspects of the catering, and whether it was on live fire or something like filet mignon, with a peppercorn sauce for 1,000 people, with no culinary training, we had to figure it out, and so we're down to maybe a Hawaiian luau, or just all these different things that people would come up with that I kind of locally became known as that guy. Like he'll do that, and so that allowed me to expand my repertoire of different kind of foods, techniques, and of course, what catering does is you're an exhibitionist. You're putting on a show.
Yeah.
So allowed me to do that, also really express myself in that way. But locally within the restaurant, at one time we had 2 restaurants in Seguin, because where we're at now, at the time, which this would have been in the early 90s, was more in, lack of a better term, the barrio, the hood, much more surrounded by residential. It was a residential area. And so the retail anchors were on the other side of town, where the highway ran through, and that sort of thing, where Seguin progressed away from us at the time. And in order for us to keep our foothold, and stay ahead of the game, was to have presence on the other side. So we built a restaurant there, which actually was twice the size of the original location, a drive-through, and it was kind of more of an up-to-date version. And with that, different part of the community was different wants and needs, to where my menu expanded to, like, the menu expanded, like at the time. It sounds, I pause because it sounds so normal now.
Yeah, right.
Baked potatoes with barbecue. We had nachos with barbecue, the brisket tacos, macaroni and cheese, corn, all 100% staples now. Nobody had that. Not 15, 20 years ago. It wasn't normal barbecue things. It was like, stay to your brand, Adrian, like stay to barbecue. And it was a different crowd. So, we did different things, our burgers, the catfish and shrimp. And, it was really kind of more of a broad menu, Southern Texas fare. But I did definitely maybe go too far sometimes. And I luckily had the right people at the right time to steer me back in. And I'd play around sometimes with daily specials. And this is before social media. And I was doing a Philly cheesesteak. And then there was some review or something, and I have a good mentor in the branding aspect of it. And he said, never forget you're an old school barbecue place. That's your identity. You can do these deviations of your barbecue twists, but always be rooted in that. And so I found, that to be very, fortifying in the way I approach it, because the review said, I walked up to this old school barbecue place, and on the front, I saw a Philly cheesesteak being advertised and was confused. And at no time more than ever had I felt how right that customer was.
Yeah,
right? Like, what the F, that's not what we're here for.
Yeah, come all the way to Texas, probably from Philly, to get a Philly cheesesteak. They're like, no way, bro. That's not going to happen.
Well, at the time I thought I was, just filling the void and playing around and being this, like, restaurant, whatever they could, what the hell I was thinking. But, I know I always needed to be grounded. My brand needed to be grounded in, who we are. And that didn't mean that I couldn't, kind of play around with, because now, fast forward from then 1998, late 90s, early 2000s, and those things I speak of, how many barbecue places do you go to that doesn't have a brisket taco on their menu, that doesn't serve macaroni and cheese, that doesn't serve even smoked turkey breast? Almost everybody, those are very prominent items in the barbecue industry now in Texas.
Yeah.
So which, and that's through, I didn't start it, I'm not claiming that, but you just see how it was like brisket, potato salad, and beans before, or brisket and sausage, and brisket, rib, and sausage, potato salad, and beans. Like, that was the norm. Now our biggest seller is macaroni and cheese. One of our biggest sellers, the turkey breast, or some of those food plays. The barbecue Frito pie was on the cooking channel, Man Fire Food, because continuing to talk about the business aspect of it, it's an Instagram world now.
Yes.
So the things look good, that are different, that get a lot of play, that's what drives things. So as an entrepreneur, you really got to identify, like, okay, what are people going after, and that's part of it now, is like, but again, not getting away from it too much, but you're aware of where the barbecue industry is at this moment.
Right. Yeah. So I think that was a great answer. And I think I'm going to pick a couple things out of there and kind of combine them for this next question. So one of the things that you mentioned was the mentor saying that you are an old school barbecue place. And that's what people that, I would imagine that I would like to go to an old school barbecue place. It's funny because I was just at a barbecue place with a client actually earlier today in Newark, New Jersey. And all those things that you just listed are on that menu. So just, I know for a fact that at least this one place has literally everything you just said: brisket tacos, macaroni and cheese, the whole kit and caboodle for sure. So, so talk to me about the balance, about that you're in an Instagram world, a social media driven world, very visual, very like popping, that kind of thing, marrying that with the old school vibe of Davila's barbecue. Like how do you make that magic? How do you make that magic sauce, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, that's, again, these are all just such great questions, because it's such an interesting, important, thing to be addressed, now, and who you are and what you do, and like what works, right? Because in the end, you're just trying to figure out what works. So that it should always be the focus, right? And in the end, what you just want it to work and be a viable thing that's sustainable. And so, like, for instance, for us, so from a social media standpoint, before that, I had made several or these different appearances and become an author and those things. I was the spokesperson or the voice, of Davila's in social media. Like, what was I doing? What was I making today? What were we doing? What's he coming up with next? Sort of thing. But then, as the more things that I started doing, because now, like, we have, again, the rub, there's different tentacles of the business now that encompass, like, my part of it and not just the restaurant. Well, now the restaurant and its social media speaks from its almost like its historical old soul of a voice that we stick to and what we adhere to in our practices and our methods and our approach. And everything's always based in our, in the tradition. And again, just the approach of just trying to go about, like, the right way or our way and what we know, and help visualize that, like our wood that's, we're burning in those old pits, and, like, down to where we're slicing the meat, in the same area that's, always moving forward with what needs to be modern, but, wrapping our sandwiches in butcher paper and just all those things that we know work, and we try to really visualize and bring across in our social media and our messaging, because people, they trust brands. They trust brands that they know what they're going to get and what they stand for more than ever. Now people want to align themselves or stand with a brand that they believe in, not only what they sell, but why they sell it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point. So I had mentioned to you earlier that we had Carrie Bringle on the show, and this episode is going to post I think maybe a month and a half after Carrie's episode, because his is already posted. But one of the things that he said was that, people, when they're going to whatever they're buying, whether they're listening to a podcast, whether they're buying barbecue, whether they're buying title insurance, which is what I sell, they want to know that, like, what's behind the person that's selling it is authentic. And, like, I know that that word gets thrown around quite a bit, but they want to know that it has a real story. And that's what I think that is so well conveyed by, I'm on the website right now. Like, I feel like this place it says established 1959 on this logo, which I think this logo is amazing. I love this logo.
It's my grandfather.
Yeah. I think that's tremendous, and I think that you're right. Yeah. Phenomenal.
And even that, there was, a lot of, I'll let you finish and I'll touch it with him on the photo.
Yeah, and I think that like truly encapsulates like that whole thing is like they can go to that Instagram page, which I plugged at the very beginning of the episode, see all the cool new things that they're doing, but then they have like a picture of you holding up a brisket in front of one of those old brick pits, and it's like, wow, like that's so cool. And you get like this feeling and like this thing that it goes well beyond just you trying to make money as a business, which you are. Let's be real, you're running a business. It goes even deeper than that because it's your family, it's your community, it's your culture, it's all these different things that I think is just like, to me, like I almost gave myself the chills just now just talking about it, just because I think that it's so cool, and I think it's done in such a like a delicate but also very profound way.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I work very hard at that. And I guess I can't really mention his name to him, but we'll talk about it afterwards. But I've had a good mentor that was one of my best friends that has a very, because I've got to give it some credit to him that has helped me guide me and see me and sort of help me develop that as a brand and what that is. And, you know, exactly what you said, like, that gives me chills knowing that that's what's come through to you and that's what's conveyed and that's the way it feels. You know, because again, two things with what you're saying, it's only attributed to is, you know, we had, I think we rebranded, I guess about 5, 6, 7 years ago, which was before we had a pig. You can look at it. Just that traditional 1950s, 60s logo of this pig holding a fork. And there's many reasons that we wanted to switch it up. But we first looked at, he said, like we spoke of a second ago, is like this, you know, this graceful man, you know, cooking your food. It's a feeling of comfort. And when you have like this wisdom and, you know, there's like grandpa looking over the pit and serving you from his table, and it's who we are. Sorry about that.
It's okay. All right, we're back. It's who we are. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Who we are, and you know, the simplicity of it, and you know, those things. You know, it's one color, and the logos like looks must be little, you know, like sausage and those connotations.
Yeah.
I actually lost track of one of my points. The second part of what you were saying earlier, can you repeat that again?
So I talked about how I like the logo. I talked about how the way that the social media and the website and everything is kind of put together. It kind of marries that old school and new school social media mentality in a great, very cool way.
Yeah, yes. And so, you know, with that being said, and that presence and what you spoke of earlier, now, like, oh, okay. So what I was going to say about, you know, the thing with the affiliation of the family and how it means well, I did a pop-up a couple of years ago when I released the book in Colombia, in Bogota, and it was at a couple of restaurants where we did at one in America. It's an American driven both establishments. One was like burger steak fare called the Ugly American, shout out to them, and the other one was called La Fama, the famous. But with that being said, is when I was there, the media, one thing that was said to me is, you know, it's one thing that and we're talking about authenticity is the reason I want to bring this up.
Yeah, authenticity, right?
It's a much bigger thing there than here. Because like one of the reporters said, she said, well, you're not just somebody from a normal state. I'm not going to say the state, she said, but
was it New Jersey? Was it New Jersey?
She was like, it's not like you're from like, this is a state not known for barbecue.
Okay, well, New Jersey, yeah, a
Texan barbecue guy. She's like, you can't buy that, you know. And again, like what you say, you know, like we are who we are is, you know, this is me. We talk about barbecue, I am of it. Like I almost did it. I didn't want to be a part of it, but you know, when my grandfather, my dad, you know, not me, and when you talk about, you know, people doing things for over like 10,000 hours, we've definitely, all three of us, put that many hours in over that pit. so it becomes something different in the end. When you say we talk about authenticity, is you can't buy that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it just shows that you're like the real deal. It's like it definitely, especially I feel like in a world in Texas, which is like obviously on my bucket list, where like I feel like my vision of Texas is you drive and you're just seeing football games and barbecue joints. Like that's all you really have down in Texas.
Oh,
People with cowboy hats. Like that's really it.
Plenty of churches also,
Churches.
and the kind of kicker into that sort of equation is I married a third generation rancher, and we have a cattle ranch that we operate. And so you think of Texas, like it doesn't really get much more Texas as far as what you would think of it is I come home from my barbecue place to my cattle ranch and tend to the cattle, and to a beautiful space out here in a town called Kingsbury, Texas. And so, I probably couldn't be much more of that, that prototype or that idea of what you think somebody in Texas is meaning to be. But my wife grew up doing this, so luckily we have this beautiful piece of land and these cows to tend to, and it's really been an honor to really see what the process is from beginning to end.
Yeah,
it's really cool thing.
Yeah, I love that too. Like the Texan part, like you're all in Texan, and I love that. And then just from just like the idea with the whole like start to finish type thing, because that doesn't happen. Like I go to the supermarket, or I have a butcher. It's way different.
Yeah, way different.
Yeah.
And that was me too all of my life. I can't speak any different. Really, really seeing that, and you just have a different reverence for the animal also. And it's you kind of know. Also, you get and you step further back and be like, this is what it's about. Living and food and nourishing yourself, and it's an arduous, difficult process too. It can be, out here in the country. Think of it. There's always not to get into something like morbid, but there's always death in the country. There's always things dying. They're always killing things, or before they be skinning things. And, there's emergency services 20, 30 minutes away from here. And, you're constantly trying to keep yourself alive, keep your cows alive. There's rattlesnakes out here. There's a lot that goes on. Again, I'm here, and you're surrounded by life and death, and on a daily basis. We see buzzards across the way. We got to make sure that we don't have an animal down, and it's real life. Because it's not just like you don't want to lose a pet; you're losing money.
Yeah.
And so, it's very real here, and we have to take a pistol and our snake boots if we go on that property, because there's a real chance you're going to see something that could hurt you very bad. And so I love it. I love the thrill of it. I love the challenge of it. A lot of people wouldn't want anything to do with that, but it's great life.
Yeah. I love that too. We don't get that here where I live here in New Jersey. It just doesn't happen. It happens in different parts of New Jersey. Like where my parents live, it's a little bit more rustic. They get bears and coyotes and all that kind of stuff. So like they have to deal with that, and they have animals and stuff too. So like they have to be careful.
Same way.
Right. Yeah. So one of the other things from the business aspect that I did want to touch on. So like we've talked about how like you've manned the pits, you probably 10,000 hours, probably way more than that on the pits, cooking it, start to finish, the whole thing. We talked about the social media side of it and the branding side of it, the website, the social media. So as the guy, and we mentioned this before, like going from just like, part of the crew to the guy, at what point do you start to like, are you the guy running the pits? I mean, are you back at the front of house because you are the owner? How does that work now?
Again, I love your questions, because so many things have transpired this last year and a half, and so many things also that are relatable, I'm sure, to your audience that have transpired that have made these things, that have really shaped these things. So the last 3 to 4 years, there's a lot going on. We had our food truck going on out 3 to 4 days a week, and we've really been short of help. Labor shortages. When the pandemic hit, going on 2 years now, my role became a get more, I was in the pits, started every day because I had to. There was nobody there. I had done a book tour previous for like a year and a half. I kind of been gone doing, those things, and things weren't where they should have been. And I really had to jump in and straighten them out. We weren't where I wanted us to be, where we needed to be with the food quality in the restaurant. And that was very challenging. And it was a slap in the face that, you realize that, here I was promoting this book, doing the Today Show and occupied with other things, and things, weren't as the quality wasn't where it needed to be in the restaurant. So I jumped in, and it was a writer that came and did a review, and I was just floored. I was so disappointed because what he spoke of was right. It was, it was a hard truth. I had to jump in. I spent the last few years doing that, but with all of these things that we've developed, now shipping online with GoBelly, as you spoke of, is a big part of it. That went up 200%. We have the cookbook that we're still distributing and promoting, and just different tentacles of the business of catering. Now we've installed a drive-through, and again, the social media and all these aspects. I know that I've had to become much more of a CEO of the operation, because that's just where we're at. I always say you throw enough shit on the wall, crap on the wall.
You can say shit. We throw shit against the wall here all the time, and we just see what sticks. That's how we've gotten to where we are today.
Well, here I've always been a dreamer. It was always just, I dream we're gonna write a cookbook. I dream our seasoning's gonna be on retail shelves. I dream we're gonna be on this. Those are all like, and I say you dream because those are all very much just, we're thankful for the opportunities. But as these things transpire and they start to happen, and there is a cookbook, and then there is the rub, and there is shipping online, but beyond, and then there is how important social media is, and and I even do a local thing for a local TV station. They give me, it's called Tips from the Pit. On KSAT 12, which they allow me to create my own content at home, and because of the pandemic, they're all looking for content. So just like I'm doing this at home, as maybe before we had done in studio, so all those things have shifted. So really keeping those things in front of me, and the business side of the rub and all those things, I've known that I've really had to step beyond and not just be in the pit every day, not just be at the counter, and implementing ways of doing things, and now temperature gauges and all timing and recordings of the barbecue, so those techniques can just be passed down, and not just relying on me and my years of experience on handling the pit, because that's not always going to be the case now. We're beyond that, and that's been one of the most challenging aspects of my transition, because my dad, bless his heart, he's 71 years old, but he didn't believe in any of those things. He wanted to do it by the way we do it.
Yeah.
He didn't like us taking temperature of the meat, or because he didn't need that. And I said, I know you don't need that, but these people do, and you're not back there, and I'm not all the time either. So that's been really, really challenging, is moving these things forward and creating policies and procedures where there's been absolutely none. There's written or recorded. Was you think of it, my grandfather doing, he put every stick of wood in there, turned every piece of meat himself, or if it wasn't, he was going to have it done, or under his guidance. But he didn't have to worry about these other things that we thankfully have to worry about now with a book and rub and all. So he didn't have those things. He was the man in the pit, and my grandfather and my dad took care of waiting on people in the front. So those were equally divided, and it worked out. Then where I've had to find somewhere in the middle, and where there wasn't going to be those people that absolutely cared with their every bit of their heart about the way those things got handled. Now you challenge keeping a crew there with our shortages and all of those things, and being busier. We had the most busy year on record to date. Thank God. Like, our sales have really been up.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's another thing that you said in there that I think is such a great point is that like, obviously you need to implement these policies and procedures to maintain like the quality of that old school way of doing things because especially something that's so ingrained in someone like you and your father and your grandfather and like your family and everything like that because we mentioned it a couple times like the family aspect of it, the community aspect of it because they're expecting a certain quality of product from you guys. That's why they're going to your restaurant, like the culture side of it, the whole thing. Like if you're not getting 100% buy-in from your crew, which is possible because, I mean, it's like you said, there's a staffing shortage. So I'm sure you don't have like the pick of everybody that you would ever want. Like you don't have a team of all these experienced barbecue people running your pits and, whatever else. So I think that's really important. So even though that's not the way they used to do it. You need to do that to make sure that that quality stays the same.
Yeah, it's been really, to say the least, challenging. You want to say a nightmare. Seguin, there's 25,000 people. And our pay tier, is not the top pay tiers. Restaurants usually aren't. You're competing with industrial jobs here, manufacturing jobs, that are, at a higher pay scale, of course, also with the demographic that you're commonly find in a restaurant, that age of worker and that person, kind of adds to that. So definitely has been, but at the same time, with that being said, it got me back to my roots. Like it helped me go back through every part of the cooking and what we were doing. Because at one point, I had to do it myself. At one point during the pandemic, we'd go in there and on like a Sunday, and it was just maybe me and one other person in the morning, and going from, putting the meat on and putting the barbecue sauce, and the beans and like all the food. Like I put it on, which was fine. I'm fully capable of it, but it was one of those things like wow, this is where we're at. you know, Whoa, it was daunting.
Yeah.
Again, at the same time, it was like, like let's do it, and we're gonna do it this way, and my, not my way, it's the way it should be done. Again, I talking about my experience. You put it in perspective. As part of the challenge is, again, when I came into the business, we were, nobody ever had any culinary experience or,
Right.
I mean, traditional schooling. My grandmother, my grandfather, my dad, and then
Which is pretty consistent, I feel like, amongst old school barbecue places,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
But then when you evolve into like what needs to be a formal kitchen that has a drive-through and production and prep and staging and just the whole process, when I went, you realize like, oh yeah, I don't come from that background. Just in your face, in moment, in New York, 2019, doing the pop up. I'm in Manhattan at a restaurant takeover. Some of the most valuable and sought after restaurant space in the world, and the honor to cook at a Mexican place, food called La Contenta. And at the time, the chef was having, just like anywhere else, staffing problems, just like anywhere else. So I get there, service was for Saturday. I'm there Friday morning, not really knowing what to expect. But I get there and he was short. So I said, you're just gonna have to get on it, just get to it. And I was like, okay. And there was so many things wrong, but I was winning this 100% organized, refined, like machine ready kitchen that was like, they had their stuff going and together. And I quickly realized how untrained and where I came from.
Yeah.
A barbecue kitchen with this, well-oiled machine running New York. And here I was, to leave with no formal training. And it was like, whoa, but I was in, like, I literally said, what the F did you get yourself into? And he was like, we were sold out for tomorrow. There's over 120 covers scheduled. And I was just like, yeah, mortified because I'd never been in an organized kitchen. Like, I literally hadn't. I never worked in another restaurant. I'd never been in like an organized kitchen. So I had to learn and figure it out. It's like, you better figure it out. Here we are, this man's kitchen at a restaurant. You better figure it out. So those were, again, when I got through it, I look back and I'm like, okay, well, you didn't come from organized kitchen. That's who you are,
Right. Yeah. But I think it's all this has been so great. I do want to give you a chance to talk about the book a little bit because we've flirted with it a couple times. So it's called Cowboy Barbecue, right?
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about the book.
So Cowboy Barbecue, again, when like the connotation that infers and, maybe the visuals that they give you right away, it's kind of different to everybody, but I found the more I dove into my story, who I was, what my ancestry was, I learned more of during the Spanish Inquisition. My family stems from Avila, Spain, which in direct translation, Davila is the Avila. And doing my research of the book, which was a little bit before Ancestry.com, I went to Avila, Spain, found my family armistice. So the story began there, and then leading into like the Spanish Inquisition, which obviously we know what that was in history, was my ancestors came over to the Americas as horse traders. And a lot of those men were former of the Spanish War. So they had a lot of training in surviving in the wild, which naturally you get it because there wasn't much else to do then in those times. Well, those people also became the vaqueros and the cowboys of the Americas, which were the original cowboys that were moving their herds to the lands of the missions, which were the churches that were so prominent in socioeconomic importance of my area, right, where I grew up, which began San Antonio, Texas, was a Spanish mission. So my story tied along with all the region, and so I started to put the food together with that. Why we ate flour tortillas, not corn, but because the Spanish missionaries saw corn as a demigod of the Native Americans. So that's why they wiped corn out in this area at the time, which they grew wheat, which in Mexico you're going to find only corn tortillas, which in South Texas you only really find flour. So a lot of those things I find had these socioeconomic ties and these religion ties of why we ate what we ate became much more the story to me of just like how to cook something, right? I wanted to know what got us here, how these ingredients and these things become of. And, part of it is like how we're such in a movement of this like nose to tail and, of course, organic, which is whatever that may be, is I find myself asking my mom, like, why did you use canned tomatoes? Like, why would you do that? Or powdered chiles. Well, she's like, because in the 60s and 70s, that was much more like the convenient, cool thing to do. Like, why labor yourself over all these tomatoes and cooking these chiles? And, that's what, this was the new thing, right?
Yeah.
Which really like moved us away from more authentic things, which now we find ourselves reaching back for, right? We want that chiles cooked, not powdered. We want, those tomatoes, heirloom, and all of those things. So that was so interesting to me of, again, like the socioeconomic happenings and where we fit in those and how that affected me, all these things. And the last kind of part of that is, I remember as a younger boy in Catholic school, and a lot of Hispanics would bring, their lunch to school. A lot of times they were ashamed of it, because we were eating, organs and what people would say, like, there was this kind of like barbacoa. There was like this, myths about it, and we'd be picked on, and other kids would cry and want to give their lunch away. They didn't want to eat it. And I always found it so weird because I was so proud of my food.
Yeah.
This is who we are. I love, barbacoa tacos and menudo and all those things. So being able to shed light, and then whenever I started to write the book, I found how these foods of my youth that were again, I mean, sometimes being shunned, were now like in the spotlight. Like now you hear about birria tacos everywhere, and like barbacoa everywhere, which being able to like tell the story of that and shed a positive light, and now it's like a star, was like very empowering to me, and telling that story of not saying what a cowboy was straight, but you think of a cowboy driving a chuck wagon or that sort of imagery. Well, those were settlers. That wasn't a cowboy. A vaquero was of the cows. A vaquero, vaca, is a man that lived in which they didn't eat meat because they didn't have it. They were nomads. And so really, sorting that story out and being a part of that story of my history was like super uber cool.
That sounds really cool. And it's at Barnes & Noble, right? I can get it at Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all across our platforms.
I might go drive to Barnes & Noble right after this episode and go pick it up myself. So
cool to see it like in New York at the time, like in Barnes & Noble down on Fifth or whatnot, or First, whatever it was, but just to see it in New York at the time. Because it's not, it never has been about like whatever the more of the vicarious part of that would be. It was more of, because people ask me, you're sharing your barbecue secrets? I'm like, do you know how proud my grandfather would be? Somebody in Ireland is cooking his food. Like, that's an honor to us. We don't see this giving anything away. We see things as sharing who we are.
Right. So I have two more questions before we get to our closing segment. I'm so happy that you said that at the very end, because that was going to be my next question. Like, do you ever stop and kind of reflect on the fact that, like you said, your grandfather would be so pumped that somebody in Ireland is cooking your stuff. And you said that you're in New York City. If you go into a Barnes and Noble in New York City, biggest city in the world, boom, there's your face on a cookbook in that Barnes and Noble. Like, how crazy is that? From your grandfather building pits by himself in 1959 and then 1972, like to now. Like, how, I mean, to me, that is, if you want to talk about like an American dream story, that's American dream story right there. I mean, that is entrepreneurship to the max, spread out over generations.
It was one of the shows. It was one of the Food Network show or the Today Show. And shout out to Orchard Street Hotel, little small hotel in Standing Orchard, I love. And this one room has a balcony with one of the best views of the city. You can look all the way uptown, all the way downtown. It's in the Lower East Side. You can see all the way to the America, the Newton Tower, the new tower, all the way up to the Empire State Building. And I'm sitting there, and it was nighttime, and it was going to go on the next day, or had been on. I can never say this without trying to tear up, but I thought about exactly what you just said. I said, my grandfather just built a pit to cook to feed his family. And, to look at all these bright lights and like one of the greatest cities in the world, getting to do this for like entertainment or whatever it may be, is the American dream for sure.
Yeah.
Can't get without crying. Shit. But it is. It's freaking powerful.
It is. Very powerful.
Like, who gets to say that?
Not many people, honestly. To me, like it is, again, chills. Like, this is the second time I've gotten chills on an episode. And that, like, we have a lot of fun on this episode, and we've gotten into some deep topics and everything. But just like the power of this story from start to finish has just been incredible. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us, and sharing how important it is. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about before, about how authentic and the real deal and the real article and like all that kind of stuff. Like, when you look at all this stuff, and I'm not bullshitting you, like, that's what I feel. And then talking to you, I get it even more. Like, I'm feeling what you're feeling and how important this is to you. So it's not just, I'm going to write a cookbook and I'm going to make a shitload of money. It's, I'm going to write a cookbook because it's going to be a testament and an honoring of everything that everybody that has done before me. And it goes, like you said, it's more than just your grandfather and your father and then you. It is your whole family. You know what I mean? Like, it's everybody had a hand in some aspect of this over time. And just to honor that, I think is incredible. It blows my mind.
Well, you just blew my mind when you just gave the preface of my book. That's what it says. It says, "This is an honor to everybody that came before me and had a part in this."
Incredible. It's fantastic. And I really appreciate you being vulnerable with us and sharing that. And I know that, I know you didn't want to get emotional, but I'm glad that you did, because I think that it really makes the whole thing that much better. So I appreciate it. So we'll, for just, for your sake, we'll get off of this one, this
Yeah,
particular topic. We'll move it into one more question, then we'll get into our
yeah.
closing segment, and then we'll wrap it up. Um, so I always like to ask people, especially entrepreneurs like yourself, about goals. So obviously you've achieved a lot, you've accomplished a lot. You guys are growing, and you said you just had your most sales in a year this past year, 2020, or is that this year so far?
Both.
Both.
It's the same trajectory. It never stopped. Even when there's like these lulls and times that we know, to expect this or that, and it's pretty much stayed, consistent, since all of this began. So, for various reasons, but yeah, both years have been the two busiest years that we've ever experienced. Thank God.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like you said, with everything going on and all that kind of stuff. But let's just look over like the next year. Are there any things that you're hoping to accomplish over the next year that are like, we got to get this done, or we're going to get this done over the next year?
Well, I want to start my new a new cookbook. I have that in the works. It's very much at its primal stage, but I've only now started to really devote my attention to that and what that is, and where it's going to be. Um, we're in talks with a retailer on getting our barbecue sauce on the shelves, which is really a thing to me that I look to the future towards is how much our brand can be involved in retail and food products, and again reaching back to like what you trust, and expanding our food retail aspect of the brand, and exploring that more. And also with Goldbelly, looking to enhance that more with more of the food packages and meal kits and instructional videos, to where now you can get the grilled cheese and do it at your house, and I'll show you how to do it on a video, which things like masterclass and a lot of these Zoom like we're doing now. I want to eventually look more into that world and how I can connect with people more, and where that platform lies, whether it be like Zoom classes, or any of those things, and look forward to enhancing that more.
Awesome. Love that. All right. So we're going to move the show into our closing segment, which we call Under the Spotlight, because this is the morning spotlight. So the Spotlighters, which is what I call my audience, has been listening to Mike Ham and Adrian Davila. And for the record, so everyone knows, I said it wrong the first time that I asked him how to say it. I totally got it wrong, but he instructed me on how to do it. Davila. So that's how you say it, everybody.
Perfect. Got it.
Perfect. Got it. So they listened to us talk for 45, 50 minutes, somewhere around there. So what would be, and we've touched about a lot. We talked about barbecue. We talked about family. We talked about business. We talked about everything in between. What would be one thing that you would want the Spotlighters to walk away from this episode with? So you're under the spotlight.
I mean, it's so cliche, and it's something that with my father, with our differences, that I have so much indifference with, because he's so rough around the edges, and and not that I'm not, but just like any generational gaps, you have different approaches with things. But the testament that I can give to you to walk away from it, I think it followed my family. The reason we were able to be here is just hard work and devotion. You can have every all the education in the world, or whatever certification that may be in whatever aspect you do, but hard work and dedication, it always pays off. It will pay off, and that's something that I've learned, and that I've got from him, being so rough around the edges. That man puts it in, to a fault, and my grandfather, he did the same thing. And we were lucky, all three of us, to have great women by our side with my grandmother, my mom, and now my beautiful wife, Sarah. Just whatever you decide to do, do it to the fullest and just, it's so cliche, but what you put into it, you get out of it. Like, it's that simple. There's no secret potion to it. Even when started some of this broadcast things, I was quote unquote discovered. And at first I thought, man, somebody's going to give you a TV show and, la-di-da. It doesn't work like that. Everything involves hard work and dedication and, devotion. So I'd like people to walk away with that because it's just real life. That's who we are.
Yeah. Awesome. Love that. And we talked about that a lot. One of my favorite quotes, which I think kind of speaks to this, and I'll just give it to you because I just like to say it, is a Gandhi quote as told by me. So obviously I don't have the same panache as a Gandhi, but if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. So like, if you're going to do something, why wouldn't you want to be the biggest, most badass version of that thing? So if you're going to be a barbecue guy, run a barbecue restaurant, why don't you want to be the biggest, most badass barbecue restaurant that you could possibly have? That's what it is. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Welcome the challenge. Welcome, what's bestowed upon you. That's all you can do is welcome it and hit it hard. My grandfather, I literally feel like he passed this thing on to me. He was very old and he wasn't doing very well. He was in one of his last days. And I forgot, they said, "Hey, Grandpa, Adrian's here, your barbecue guy." And he looked at that person, he goes, "I was pretty good too." And couldn't barely speak a word. And he was so proud of that. And I thought to myself, I want to love something so much that I'm that proud of it and try that hard. Like you say, you're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly.
Yeah.
So you really left that with me, and I hold on to those things.
I love it. I've loved this whole episode. So if people need more Adrian, if the people need more Davila's barbecue, where can they go to get it? Let's hit them with the links.
Yeah, you can go to our website at davilasbarbecue.com. Follow us on all platforms, of course, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, davilasbarbecue.com. My own personal Instagram and Twitter and Facebook is the Adrian Davila, because there's so many.
Yeah, I had a hard time finding some episodes, like I mentioned before, to do my research. I was looking for podcast episodes, and I was like, oh man, there's like, and then they also give you the Adriana Davila, and I'm just like, ah, shit, like this is gonna be impossible to find. So, but I did find him, and I told you I was gonna. So I will make sure that I put those links in the show notes. I will also make sure that I put my links in the show notes if for some reason, now that Adrian and I are great friends, if you want to go through me to get to him, because obviously he's super intimidating. So you could just do that, themorningspotlight.com or themorningspotlight@gmail.com. That's the website and the email address. I forget which one I said first, but those are them if you want to go through me. So Adrian, thank you so much for coming on with us today, talking barbecue, talking business, talking everything that we talked about. I thought this episode was phenomenal, and it was great meeting you. I'm so glad you came on the show.
It's great conversation. It's always so easy, much easier when it's just like having a conversation like a friend with a friend. I feel like I've known you already for a long time, and I love the vibe and your show, and I'm just appreciative, and thank you for having me. It's great. It wasn't definitely wasn't hard. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, that's good. That means I'm doing my job the right way. And like I said, I mean, I love this episode. I did not really know what to expect going in, but this has just blown any expectation I had out of the water. So I really appreciate you coming on. And the Spotlighters, thank you for listening to us today. I really appreciate it. And we will catch you next time.
All right, brother.